Good evening, America. Good evening, Virginia. Welcome to special pre-election night coverage. In 24 hours, the voters of Virginia will choose a new governor, a new lieutenant governor, a new attorney general, and a whole number of local candidates, including a number of new candidates to the House of Delegates. It's a very important election. And what's interesting, of course, is that in 2013, there are only two states that have elections on the off years. One is Virginia and one is New Jersey. New Jersey is running a typical Republican, you might call a standard run-of-the-mill Republican, Chris Christie. He's supposed to cruise to victory, we'll see. And the Republicans in Virginia are running three strong Tea Party candidates from the Tea Party radical wing of the Republican Party. It'll be interesting to see how they do. We're going to talk about all three of them and everything coming up. First, I want to introduce my co-host. Bettina Lawton has done a terrific job in doing shows called Inside Scoop Virginia for the past, 2 years now, Bettina?
3 years.
3 years now. And while I've been focused mostly on national and international issues, Bettina has given you the local and state issues that you need. Well, this is a show where we can come together because the issue is a state race,
right.
but one that has national implications. And sitting next to Bettina is Cesar D'Aguilar, and he is the chair of the Fairfax Democratic Party.
Glad to be here.
And it's always a pleasure. I seem to see you only on pre-election nights, but
We'll have to change that.
We'll have to change that and hang out more. As I said, in 24 hours, the voters of the state of Virginia will elect a new governor, a new lieutenant governor, and a new attorney general. The Democrats running, Terry McAuliffe and Ralph Northam and Mark Herring, are all pretty much standard run-of-the-mill. They're good people. We can talk about them. In fact, I'm going to ask you some questions about the three of them. But they're sort of from the middle, the moderate wing, the business-oriented wing of Virginia. I'm afraid to say that there's normal politicians, and therefore they're less interesting than the three Tea Party candidates because they haven't taken the kind of extreme positions that these three have. We got to talk about Ken Cuccinelli, E.W. Jackson, and a guy who I think has really gone under the radar, but I really want to focus on tonight, and that's Mark Obenshain, the state senator who's running for the Virginia Attorney General race. Because, Ken Cuccinelli, a lot of his more socially intolerant positions are known. Let's see. He wants to bring back sodomy laws in Virginia, which would ban oral sex between married couples. Not sure why Ken Cuccinelli wants to be looking over the shoulders of married couples, but you'll have to ask him that. He's also come out very firmly against the state universities that wanted to treat gay people and straight people equally. He thinks they should discriminate against gay people. Again, not quite sure why, but I guess
Not sure how any of that creates jobs, by the way.
Me neither. Ken Cuccinelli he's very much from. It's interesting because I don't think all Tea Party candidates are this intolerant. I mean, I think there are Tea Party candidates that mostly focus on taxes and things like that.
Right.
But these are from let's look at the lieutenant governor candidate, E.W. Jackson. He's from what I would call the Taliban wing of the Republican Party. He is a reverend, but he's not your ordinary Christian reverend. He compared, the KKK, Planned Parenthood to the KKK.
That's right.
He compared abortion to slavery. Mm-hmm. He called gay people sick and perverted. He's definitely not your mainstream Republican.
Well, and you have to remember the Democratic Party are also anti-Christians. We are not the Christian.
Their words.
Their words. His words.
That's right.
I don't believe that you have to compare Planned Parenthood to the KKK to be a good Christian.
I don't think so.
I just don't. I don't think that's.
It's what happens when you have a few people deciding.
Well, let's talk about that. So, Cesar, the Republican Party, the Democrats had a primary. And the people of Virginia got together and they voted on who they wanted. There were contested races, and they chose their candidate slate. The Republicans had the opportunity of having a primary. Mm-hmm. The current Lieutenant Governor, Bill Bolling, wanted a primary. He's from the moderate wing of the Republican Party.
And a primary would work for him because if you've got a broad group of people voting, the likelihood of getting somebody who is more moderate is higher. But that's not what Ken Cuccinelli wanted. And of course, we do have to remember that poor Lieutenant Governor Bolling thought he had a deal. The last time we had a governor race, he stepped aside to let McDonnell run. And this was supposed to be his turn. And that didn't happen, which can sort of explain why he and Cuccinelli are not best buds.
No, Bill Bolling is maybe the only sitting Republican lieutenant governor in history that has not endorsed the Republican ticket.
Right. Well, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of our Republican moderate friends actually saying, you know what, I cannot support
It's fascinating.
Ken Cuccinelli.
It's fascinating because Terry McAuliffe has the support of all Democrats, the large majority of independents, and even, as you say, a growing number of Republicans.
And a huge growing number on the business side.
And Ralph Northam, of course, Dr. Northam certainly does too. Most people consider Jackson to be, I'll use the words wacko. He's a little crazy. He's a little mixed up, and you wonder if you're a woman in Virginia, or if you're a gay person in Virginia, what it means to have this Taliban-like candidate.
It makes sense if you're having a conversation in an echo chamber,
I guess.
which is what that primary selection was about.
He said that if you're not Christian, you practice a false religion.
Right.
I'm Jewish. Is he saying that Jews don't belong in Virginia? Or Muslims, or atheists, or agnostics, or Buddhists, or Baha'i?
Again, which is why the
Hindus?
moderate wing of the Republican Party is saying no.
No.
They're saying no.
Here's what I want to focus on tonight, because I think a lot of people know about Ken Cuccinelli. If not, they've seen a lot of commercials. Terry McAuliffe has a lot of commercials on the air. I think a lot of people know about this wacko preacher, E.W. Jackson. There's a guy going in under the radar. And he's State Senator Mark Openshain, the Republican candidate for Attorney General. Now, Mark Herring, the Democratic state senator, again, middle of the road, liberal, but definitely not a leftist, not way out there, sort of a solid middle of the road Virginia state senator. And I was looking the other day at their records on various things. And we'll talk about guns, and we'll talk about abortion, and those things where you would expect liberals and conservatives to differ on. But I was surprised by Mark Openshain's position on child molesters. He supports saying if you molest a child, you rape a child, and that child makes it to age 20 before they complain. A lot of children, when they're raped, have post-traumatic stress, and it can take years for them to come and talk about their experiences. You're home free. Now, not only did Mark Herring support a 20-year statute of limitations for child molestation, but so did the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats. Virtually the entire legislature said, you know what, if you rape a child, you shouldn't get off scot-free after 2 years. Not Mark Openshain. I'll tell you something else he supported. He supported, and this is something that made the Humane Society really angry, he was against regulating puppy mills. Now, you know about these things. You've probably seen those commercials on TV with that theme music, with the terrible treatment of animals, of kittens and dogs and so forth. And of course, the vast majority of the legislature, I think for all except 2 or 3, in fact, I think Ken Cuccinelli was about the only one that voted with them on this one, said, you know what, we have to regulate to make sure you don't mistreat puppies. And yet Openshain said, nope. I'm fine with mistreating puppies. He actually was against laws that prohibited dog fighting. He was against laws that prohibited cockfighting. He was against laws that would allow the torture of foxes in Virginia. The Humane Society, this is the most nasty toward animals guy maybe ever running Attorney General history. That's why I wrote a piece that you can find on my website, marklevingtalk.com. It says if you hate puppies and like rape, here's your perfect candidate, Mark Openshain, because let's talk about serious matters. Let's talk about rape. This is a guy who advocates if a rapist violently rapes a woman, and again, if you're a woman, imagine yourself. If you're a man, think of your wife or your daughter or your mother or your grandmother or your granddaughter. He believes that the rapist can force that woman to have their child, even after the rape's over. She can't get a morning after pill. He would criminally punish her for getting a morning after pill. He was so extreme, at one time he even sponsored a bill and later withdrew it after extreme criticism, that he was so afraid of women having abortions that he said that women who don't report their miscarriages within 24 hours could face up to 1 year in prison.
Well, it's important to know, too, that it was reported to the police. It's not like you've got to
you
go to
call
your
the cops.
doctors.
Right.
You got to turn yourself in to the police.
For having a miscarriage,
Right.
which is a natural occurrence. It's some 50% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. I mean, it's not that unusual.
Well, and I am particularly unpersuaded when somebody says, well, I didn't realize what I was doing. I didn't mean that. And that's what he says when people say, well, you did it. And he goes, but I withdrew it. It's like, yeah, but you only withdrew it because somebody was paying enough attention.
Because people were criticizing it.
And
He
so
was
it doesn't
against
work.
laws that criminalize gang violence. which again, if you want to be tough on crime, this is going to be the top law enforcement officer in Virginia. That's what he's running for.
Right.
And yet he's fine with gang violence. He's fine with child molesters, but don't be a woman that has a miscarriage. That's a bad thing. He was against the minimum wage being increased. He was against any kind of background checks whatsoever for guns. In fact, he's the guy that sponsored the law, not only that got rid of the Virginia law that you can only buy one handgun a month. All right, some people disagree with that. He actually felt that you should be able to go into bars with AK-47 and Glocks. I guess you get really, really drunk, and he's fine with you having loaded guns. And I'm thinking, we don't let people drive when they're drunk.
So here's to sum it up. They're for less regulation on anything except when it comes to women.
Or children, child molestation. I'll give you another one. No, I'll give you another thing that he didn't want. There was a law by Mark Herring proposed to protect elderly people from being swindled. Basically, it was a law to punish criminally people who try to trick the elderly out of their life savings. Herring was for it. Obenshain was against it. He was I'll give you another one he was against. He's got a long list of them. There was a law in Virginia, and again, you'd think this is pretty basic, that said that parents could have up to 4 hours a year. So we're not talking about a huge amount of time. 4 hours a year if they wanted to take off work without penalty to care for their children. Now, we're not talking 4 hours a week. We're not talking 4 hours a month. 4 hours a year. And Obenshain said, nope, keep those parents away from their kids. There's nothing the kids could need. 4 hours a year, make them work. So if you gotta kind of have to not like children and not like the elderly and not like women and not like gay people. Obenshain
not like working people.
Well, not like working people. That's right. Obenshain on gay people. He actually is against. He's for discrimination in state employment. So I guess he wants to fire all the state gay workers. And the first Virginia judge that was appointed as a gay man, he walked out. He refused to be part of that. So you're a second-class citizen if you're a woman or gay or children or parents or elderly or a puppy
or an immigrant
or an immigrant.
That's right.
Or an immigrant. So here's the thing. My question for you is, people know about Cuccinelli. They know about Jackson. How come Obenshain is flying under the radar? I was shocked when I read this about his record.
Well, people are so taken with Cuccinelli and so taken with E.W. Jackson. I mean, they are just so far over the line that they make somebody like Obenshain look
Obenshain's
moderate.
quiet, but he votes.
Quiet.
But he votes extremely.
Right.
If you want to continue what Ken Cuccinelli did in the Attorney General's office, you want to sue our universities because you don't agree with
climate change.
The climate change.
That's another thing he
science work
supports,
that they're
right?
doing. If you want to continue all of this craziness that Ken Cuccinelli has done as Attorney General, then you vote for Mark Obenshain because that is what you will get. They are, as they say,
even if
two
you're tough on
peas in a
crime,
pod.
though, here's the thing: even if you're tough on crime and you want the top law enforcement officer to be tough on crime, who could oppose a 20-year statute of limitation for child abuse? I mean, who says, you know what, okay, you abused a child. Oh, I'll tell you something else he supported. I looked up. If you tell a clergyman, or you are a clergyman, that abuses children, or you tell a clergyman, he thinks that should be confidential. You know, you raped a child, the vast majority of the legislature said, you know what, if you rape a child, you need to turn that person in. But he said, no, just tell your priest, and you don't have to worry about raping children. Well, let me suggest that's a problem. If and it occurs in all denominations, but there's a problem with sexual molestation of children.
Right.
And if you could simply tell your clergyman or clergywoman and get off for that's a severe problem.
It's called radical ideology.
So all three of these people, they're more than Tea Party people. They're from the Jerry Falwell, I guess, wing. No. Although I'm not even sure Jerry Falwell would go this far.
Yeah, even that's an insult to Jerry Falwell.
Maybe it is.
Actually, I have to tell you this. That's an insult to him too.
Well, let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to have a number of candidates come forward. We've got some local candidates in the race. We're going to talk about the national races, but also about the local races. Cesar, Fairfax County, the largest jurisdiction in Virginia.
1 in 7 voters.
What is going on specifically in your county?
How much time do I have?
What are the most important races in Fairfax County?
Well, let me tell you, I'm feeling really good about most of them. I think a couple we got to get the turnout high. I think I'm feeling good at the top, but we still got to get turnout high. We cannot let up for a single minute here.
How about the House of Delegates? I mean, the Republicans almost control a veto-proof majority. So even if Terry McAuliffe were to become governor, they could overrule it.
Yeah, we're going to break that coming out of Fairfax County. I'm predicting a big turnout in Fairfax County.
How many seats? Can I ask you that question?
I'm going to go with 5.
Five
go with 5
in Fairfax County.
If we get the turnout that we've been targeting, if we get the turnout we've been IDing, we're going to turn out.
Okay, but
care.
Bettina, every time you look at these numbers, you look in 2012, massive turnout. You look at 2008, massive turnout. Virginia went for Obama, and it wasn't even close in both 2008 and 2012. By those numbers, you'd think we were a blue state.
Right.
But you look at 2009, you look at 2011, you look at 2013.
That's what we're worried about.
And here comes, and Virginia looks like a red state. They vote overwhelmingly for the Republicans.
They do.
Where are the Democratic voters? Are they just sitting home?
Well, they have in the past, but I will tell you, we have really, the advantage of Cuccinelli and E.W. Jackson and Obenshain is that the Democrats are really motivated this year to get out.
Right.
And we have had, with our state party this year, they took over the coordinated campaign so that it was really coordinated statewide. And we have canvassed so many people. We canvassed probably around 100,000 people Virginia-wide just last weekend. We've got canvasses running all the time. We know where these people are. We're keeping better track of them. And people remember what happened. People remember, oh my gosh, in 2009, I didn't turn out. Look what happened.
Well, and what's interesting is what happened, of course, we have a Republican governor who may be the first governor in Virginia ever to be indicted. Right. Now, the federal authorities are waiting to decide whether to indict McDonnell until after this election, and that's their choice. But given all the pay-to-play, all the bribery, all the money he got from various people that his wife got, that his daughter got, and Ken Cuccinelli got money from the same people.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Mark Obenshain, I don't think he got the money, but he supports laws. He supports laws that you give unlimited gifts. We call them gifts. Isn't that nice?
Yes, we do. In Virginia, we're very genteel.
We call them gifts to politicians.
Right.
And unlimited amounts to their children, their spouses,
right.
without disclosure. Obenshain thinks that if you have to disclose your bribe, it's just not a pretty thing.
Well, it's not.
Whereas Herring actually thinks that you shouldn't be able to give unlimited bribes to Virginia politicians. So on a pure corruption front, I guess my question is, how does the fact that McDonnell is approaching indictment going to affect how people feel about the Republican leadership of Virginia?
Well, I think it's going to have a huge impact. And what their counter will be are the things we've seen. Voter suppression tactics, right? I mean, we just saw a huge purge of the rolls so many weeks before an election.
Well, what about that? I'm nervous about that.
Well, which is why we filed litigation against the local State Board of Elections here. And DPVA, the Democratic Party of Virginia, also filed litigation a couple weeks ago. So they're going to try to suppress some of our folks coming out, but I think people see that, and that's why they're more energized this time. We call them the non-niners, right? The folks that came out for Obama in 8 and in 12, but did not in 9.
But what if someone doesn't have the proper ID? I know, for example, the former Speaker of the House, Jim Wright in Texas, was denied the right to vote. This guy's 90 years old. He's a former Speaker of the House. He's denied the right to vote because he's 90. He doesn't drive it anymore. And his driver's license had expired. He hadn't gotten a new one. And they said, sorry, former Speaker of the House, you can't vote. A lot of elderly in Virginia are not as famous as Jim Wright. And I'm concerned that they may be in their 90s. They may not drive anymore.
Well, there are other IDs, forms of IDs they can use. And we have made it a point to educate all of Fairfax County.
A utility bill.
Absolutely, with your name on it.
With your name on it. That's all you need. A utility
or your
bill.
voter ID card. But
which doesn't have to have a picture on it.
No, the photo ID is possibly going into effect next year.
Right.
But for right now, we're good.
That's the big thing that people need to realize is the photo ID bill that got so much press when it passed isn't effective in this year.
Right.
Doesn't become effective until next year. We take over all the statewide races, we take back the House of Delegates, we keep the Senate, and maybe that bill never goes into effect at all.
And then people can have the right to vote. All right, well, I'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick break because we've got a lot of elected officials that I know want to join us and say what they have to say. Plus, coming up, I've got a nice piece by the noted humorist Will Roberts, who's done a little piece on Mark Obenshain and his plan to require women to report their miscarriages to the police. I think you'll enjoy this little segment. Coming up right after this.
I need a job.
Necesito trabajo.
I would like to speak English better.
Me gustaría hablar inglés
I
mejor.
want to be a U.S. citizen.
Quisiera ser ciudadano de los Estados Unidos.
For over 35 years,
Por más de 35 años,
the Hispanic Committee of Virginia has been serving our community.
el Comité Hispano de Virginia ha estado sirviendo a nuestra comunidad.
Job training and placement,
Capacitación, ayuda para conseguir trabajo,
education for children and adults,
educación para niños y adultos,
immigration, naturalization, and medical referrals.
ayuda para los procesos de inmigración migración y naturalización y orientación sobre médicos
are a small part of what we do.
son solo una pequeña parte de lo que hacemos.
For help, information, or to volunteer,
Para ayuda, información o para ofrecerse como voluntario,
contact the Hispanic Committee of Virginia,
comuníquese con el Comité Hispano de Virginia,
helping everyone participate more fully in American society.
ayudando a todos a participar plenamente en la sociedad norteamericana.
Hey, Lena, where's yours?
Would you notice if you were missing half your kidney function? According to the National Kidney Foundation, 20 million people have chronic kidney disease, and 20 million more may be at risk and not even know it. Anyone with high blood pressure, diabetes, or family history of chronic kidney disease is at risk. Early diagnosis is vitally important. To get the whole story, talk to your doctor and visit the National Kidney Foundation at kidney.org or call for a free brochure. Because when it comes to chronic kidney disease, you might not know the half.
Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton. I'm the host of Inside Scoop Virginia, and with me tonight is Mark Levine, who is the host of Inside Scoop, the big Inside Scoop, the national, the international, the absolutely amazing Mark Levine is here. And then we also have the equally amazing, I don't want to slight the other folks, equally amazing guys on this side with Cesar Del Aguila, who is the chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, and Mark Sickles, who is a delegate. He's running for re-election this year. That's going to happen. It just depends on how overwhelming the vote is. Mark is also the head of the House Democratic Caucus. And so we're going to talk a little bit about not just Fairfax, but what you see in the House of Delegates statewide. As we mentioned in the first segment, there's a veto-proof House right now.
Is it really veto? How many Republicans are in the House right now?
There are 68 effective. There's one independent and 67.
Out of 99.
Out of 100.
Out of 100.
Out of 100, but the Senate can sustain a veto too, which is 14 Democratic votes. So, you don't have to worry about that issue so much. We talk about it because it's a benchmark. We're going to surpass 34 tomorrow, which is the level we need in the House. But luckily, we have the Senate, and of course, the big thing we're going to learn tomorrow night is whether we take control of the state Senate, which is it's on the ballot tomorrow night for Virginia voters to decide.
Which would happen if Ralph Northam wins Lieutenant Governor,
and
because it's an equally split Senate.
And we would have to win 2 special elections coming up, which we think we can do.
And those would occur in a couple months?
Yeah, the governor would set the date for it. Right. There would be time for a primary, and then they'd set the election. Sometimes they have them as late as after the session starts, but I think there's enough time now to have these crash elections. We're all used to them. It happens every year or two that we have these. To get the 2 senators in place before January 8th, I think, is the day we're starting.
Mark, explain to voters, Virginia voters, why in a state that voted for President Obama in 2008 and 2012, has 2 Democratic senators, has a Republican governor, so we're a purple state. Yeah. Why they would have a Virginia House of Delegates that's 2/3 Republican in a state that I can understand 52-48 or 55-45, but 68?
Sure. Well, redistricting is a wonderful thing. When you can have the pen yourself and do it, and we need to get away from that. We need a bipartisan or nonpartisan.
So they drew the lines to ensure.
Yeah, that's the main reason. But we also self-select where we live. I mean, that's part of it too. You can't draw a Republican seat in Arlington or Alexandria City. It's impossible.
Well, there aren't enough Republicans in Arlington.
Right. I mean, there's no way to gerrymander a Republican seat in those jurisdictions. So part of it is where we live, and our part of the state up here is culturally more centrist and liberal and open to and more tolerant, as we all know, and our population is so diverse. Our high schools have kids from all over the country, all over the world, speak over 100 languages in most of our high schools in Fairfax County. So the world is changing, Virginia's changing, and I think that has manifested itself in our voting patterns. The higher the number of votes, usually the better off we are. I note that in the Politico story you might have read this morning, the chairman of the Republican Party, Pat Mullins, is hoping for a 30% turnout.
Right.
He said we're going to win with 30%, and it is.
So they want to keep turnout down.
Absolutely, and
or the number of people that vote down. There's two ways to do that: low turnout, and you suppress the vote. Right.
So what are we doing? You'd be the one in charge, I guess, the Democratic Party in Fairfax. What are we doing to increase the vote? I mean, to get people, how do we get the people who voted just last year to even know there's an election tomorrow?
Well, I think Mark knows this better than anyone. It's voter contact, voter contact, voter contact. And it's canvassing. There's nothing more persuasive than the candidate at that door talking to that person.
I think the reason we're going to do so well tomorrow in these races is because of the ground game. That gives you the extra 2 or 3% you need. When people are ready to vote for Democrats right now after the performance that we've had in our General Assembly, particularly in 2012. People have long memories. They don't remember a lot of what the General Assembly does, but they remember our session in 2012 and how off the charts.
Tell us some of the things that were off.
Well, that's when we had the personhood bill fly out of the House with hardly any opposition. We had the
let's talk about what this means. Personhood means that if a fetus would have,
it's really a fertilized egg. It's not really it's not a fetus.
An embryo. Yeah. An embryo would. So in other words, a miscarriage, I guess, would be equivalent to child abuse.
Right. It's not a pregnancy even. It's just a fertilized egg, and of course, a lot of birth control works by not allowing implantation in the uterus and preventing pregnancy.
So Ken Cuccinelli and Mark Obenshain would actually ban these forms of birth control.
Well, the point of personhood overall is to make abortion illegal, but it also has other impacts with birth control, with in vitro fertilization. That would be illegal for infertile couples. That option would be gone. And of course, so we've talked a lot about in this election, but a miscarriage could be a crime, and if there's a provision in the bill that says if you do this and you do this, it wouldn't be a crime, but that would lead to obviously an investigation of what happened when you had your.
So we have police coming into women's homes saying, did you really miscarry?
This is the implications of the law. We made these points on the floor, and it didn't matter. The voters of Mississippi just turned it down a month or two before we passed it out of the House of Delegates easily. So
okay, we have to take a break, and we have more elected officials coming up. I want to talk about the most extreme thing that even Jon Stewart made fun of, the transvaginal ultrasound, where the Virginia Republicans want to pass through a bill to allow the state to put something inside a woman against her will. I don't want to think about it, but I'll talk about that when we come back.
I helped turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school. One with a curriculum that really motivates kids.
What do you mean?
One that has extended hours, 6 days a week, year-round. With loads of academic, cultural, and recreational activities. One that has support services like medical and dental right there. A school where parents' involvement is encouraged, where teachers have more time to teach, and students are excited about learning. There's just one problem. My child doesn't ever want to come home. You can help turn your school into a community school for excellence. Find out how. Call 1-877-LOVE-TO-LEARN.
It's coming. Right to your neighborhood. And when it does, you may be surprised. It's your Social Security statement of your benefits, and it's going to help you plan your financial future. Your benefit statement will tell you how much Social Security you're eligible to receive and when you'll get it. Then you'll know how much you need to save for retirement, because that's coming too. The future is in your hands. Choose to save.
The toxic fumes from this meth lab are seeping into Jamie's sinus cavity. Ammonia vapors invade her throat. Toxic gases fill her lungs. Jamie's body is deteriorating. And she doesn't even know it.
Jamie, dinner.
So, who has the drug problem now? Find out how meth affects you at drugfree.org/.
turn my child's public school into a whole new kind of school.
Back to a very pre-election edition of the Inside Scoop, where we're combining Inside Scoop with Mark Levine and Inside Scoop Virginia with Bettina Lawton, because this race has national as well as Commonwealth implications. And our guests are Cesar del Aguilar, the head of the Democratic Party in Fairfax, and the head of the Democratic Caucus is Mark Sickles, who's a sitting delegate. Mark, tell us what happened, because this received national attention. It really did, and unfortunately the comedians enjoyed it, but it was actually a very serious topic. What's this transvaginal ultrasound?
Well, in order for a woman in the earliest stages of pregnancy to actually see the fetus, is what they want to force women to do so they'll feel guilty and not have an abortion. The only way to do that is to have an internal probe inserted. And I don't know how many people realize that, but we explained it on the floor to them. And
it's a wand that goes inside a woman. I mean, that's not.
If you've been watching TV, you might have seen one on television.
Yeah.
And this would be against their will. Your insurance doesn't have to cover it. It's a total burden on you to pay for it. Now,
they have to pay to have some foreign object inserted inside them if they want an abortion.
Eventually, there was an amendment to make it optional. That part is optional. So now we have a law that says when you can't even see the fetus because it's just a mass of cells, that you have to still have an external or jelly on the belly type sonogram and look at that. So you have to pay for that, even though you will not see anything from doing it. So it's
it's not medically indicated at all.
Not medically, no. No, I mean
basically, if you want to punish women for considering abortions, that's what you do.
It would be 85 or 90% of abortions are done in the earliest stages of pregnancy. In Virginia, an abortion clinic, you can only do first trimester abortions anyway. It's always been that way.
And so you can't even see anything with these ultrasounds. It's absolutely useless expense.
That's what's ludicrous about it.
Now, when is this law going into effect, or is it in effect right now?
It's in effect. It's the law of the land right now.
And this is what the Republicans in the House of Delegates
and the Senate, they pass it out of the Senate narrowly. I hope with rational people joining the General Assembly, which is a good segue to what can happen tomorrow. We're hoping to bring a lot more help on our side to bring more centrism to the House of Delegates, and we've got a lot of good candidates out there on the strength of the strong ticket we have against this ticket that you were describing earlier. We think there'll be some good coattail effects. We have a lot of candidates that have worked hard enough to be in a position to win tomorrow.
And you have some of them with you, I believe.
Well, there's a couple. I think we have a couple out here.
We could bring them out.
One is my current colleague, Alfonso Lopez, who's running for re-election in Arlington and part of Fairfax.
Yeah, there's a few in Fairfax. We're going to deliver those big time for Alfonso.
Yeah, and Alfonso's been very involved in...
Crowded set, but welcome.
Yep, I'm going to hand you this microphone in a second to tell us about your good work, particularly on immigrant issues and on how we can get a DREAM Act equivalent in Virginia.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on the show, folks.
Thanks for coming.
I apologize. My little horse, I've been door knocking for the last 15 months. Basically, right now, the Latino population in Virginia is...
Take a look at tell them.
Oh, tell them. The Latino population in Virginia is at 8%. 6% naturalized citizens and citizens. We now make up around 2.4%, 2.5% of the registered voters in Virginia. Around 215,000 voters. Jim Webb beat George Allen by 9,316 votes. And overall voter registration for Latinos in Virginia has increased by 91% between 2000 and 2010.
Wow.
What we're talking about here right now is a huge growth in the Latino voice in the Commonwealth. And here's a kicker. The average age of a Latino citizen in Virginia is 15 years old. 15. And so what does that mean? 56% of these kids know someone who is undocumented. Their family members, their friends, folks that they've come into contact with in their neighborhood. And so they also see that there's a large segment of the Republican Party in Virginia, especially in the House of Delegates, that's been systematically demonizing the Latino community, the New American community, and the immigrant community, basically for the last 12 years. Mm-hmm. And so,
what would be the difference between a democratically controlled legislature assembly in Virginia for a Latino voter? What would change?
you would not stop seeing the Alabama and Arizona style anti-immigrant legislation, these ugly bills that are specifically put out to build up walls
Give me
around
an
the
example
state.
of one that happened in Virginia.
Well, stop and frisk. There was this bill that was put forward. It was put forward by Rich Anderson, I think, last year or 2 years ago. That basically would have said it was a copy of a bill that had been done in Arizona. That would have basically said, given the local police the ability to simply look at someone and say, if I have a reasonable suspicion that they might be undocumented, then I can, stop and frisk.
Not sure you have that reasonable suspicion. Maybe you heard them speak Spanish. I mean,
well,
where does that come from?
Crazy?
Actually, they look like Cesar, and that was
Well, and that's one of the reasons. This is a very key. That was one of the reasons I got into this whole political thing. They tried this in Herndon, so people that look like us could be just, pulled over and questioned in America.
Question.
Right. And one was a bill put forward by Ken Cuccinelli, actually, that said if you speak a language other than English, even while on your break and on the job, you can be summarily fired.
Right.
And so we're not talking about creating a welcoming Virginia. We're not talking about creating a dynamic Virginia that attracts talent. We're talking about building walls around Virginia. And the one thing I really care about is the Virginia DREAM Act, which is in-state tuition for undocumented students. We have something that Governor Kane said several years ago, and he said a lot during the Senate campaign. Virginia's competing against not just other states, but other countries for economic development dollars. And what does it say about us when, from an economic development perspective, when we are telling talented kids, in some cases in Arlington County, some of the best high schools in America, graduating as valedictorian, that
they have no future.
We pay for your elementary K through 12, but we're going to put up this big stop sign. You can't go on.
Here's what I understand. Most of these kids, if you're 12 or if you're 6 or if you're 3, you don't decide to enter this country.
Exactly right.
You're brought in by your parents, and if you want to attack the parents, that's one thing. But the kids themselves, they only speak English. They only know America. And what are we going to do? Send them to a foreign country now?
Mark, in our House of Delegates, we passed a bill that said not only could you not get in-state tuition, even if you've only known America, you could not get in. We would ban them attending our colleges and universities.
The anti-dream.
And it's the anti-dream. We passed that in the House of
If they apply
Delegates.
that to Ted Cruz, who's born in Canada, I mean, it's just amazing. I think maybe he's not brown enough for them to do that to him, but it's just I don't know. It's just the intolerance.
That's what we're trying to get past. Right. I mean, we were built on being a tolerant, welcoming state and a tolerant, welcoming community and country, and the fact that we're going this other way is, I think, it says very bad things about where we are right now.
Did you have another House Delegates candidate you want to introduce?
Yeah, come on in, Ed Deitch.
By the way, Alfonso
You're welcome
Lopez,
to stay if you want.
the first Latino democratically elected
To the
in the
Virginia
Commonwealth.
General Assembly.
Congratulations.
Very good.
Congratulations.
My man.
Thank you.
Please join us.
Come on in, Ed.
Mark, introduce
Ed Deitch is an activist and somebody who's been very concerned about humane issues all his life, and he is working hard to unseat a longtime incumbent in South Fairfax County, and I'll let you, Ed, talk about his campaign.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you guys for having me back, actually. It's good to see you again,
Thanks
Bettina.
for coming on.
One of the things that got me involved in the first place in this race was the video you were referring to on the floor of the House that happens to be against my opponent. He's the one who stood there joking about the transvaginal ultrasound bill, couldn't say the words even though he was a sponsor of it. He was going trans V this, trans V that, just could not spit it out of his own mouth.
He could force the state to insert an object into a woman's vagina,
but he couldn't talk
say
about
the word
it.
vagina.
Couldn't talk about it. And summarily embarrassed his wife and the state of Virginia, all in one video. And as soon as that video was over, my wife, knowing my personality, just looked at me and said, "So when are you declaring you're running for the House?" She knew I was not going to stand there and watch this happen. You were also talking about Mr. Obenshine's lack of support for getting rid of puppy mills.
Yeah, no, I don't even understand that. I mean, I almost get, weirdly, this misogyny and this anti-gay stuff and anti-Latino stuff. Gets the wrong word. These are old prejudices. But what does the guy have against puppies?
Well, I could tell you that I'll be more than happy to take him with me the next time I go on a deployment. I volunteer with the Humane Society's National Disaster Animal Response Team.
Good for you.
And part of what we do is not just going into places like Joplin and New Jersey after the hurricane and tornadoes, but we go into puppy mills, animal fighting things. And I can tell you that the biggest heartbreak you see is a puppy mill.
What goes on inside a puppy mill? I've never been inside one. I don't think I could handle it.
Picture, the little kennels that you might put a dog into kennel train. Take the tray out of the bottom so that they can only stand on the mesh. Stack them 10 high.
On top of each other?
On top of each other. So obviously you don't want to be the low puppy in that stack. And every heat cycle, they impregnate these dogs until they can no longer spit out a puppy. After that, they have no use for them. So they are killed. And this is what they go through.
And Mark Obenshain voted against regulating these puppy mills.
Correct.
In Virginia.
In Virginia.
One of the things I found interesting was that the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats supported this regulation. This wasn't a partisan thing.
It should not be a partisan thing. One of my 2 dogs was rescued from a puppy mill in Kentucky. Normally, it can take a dog coming out of that scenario, depending how long they were in, 2 to 3 years before they start acting like a normal pet.
They have
when she was first brought to my backyard, she wasn't sure how to step on the grass. It scared her. Now, fortunately, she's become a normal dog. But it took a year and a half of somebody who works with these animals continuously to get her to be a normal pet.
Did Mark Obenshain ever say why he was opposed to regulating puppy mills? Did he get money from the puppy mill industry? I mean,
he's against any
regulation.
Any kind of regulation whatsoever,
ideology.
I would guess he's against.
That's what it is. Right? I mean, that's the ideology.
But I can, as far as tomorrow is concerned, my staff and I have great expectations of how things are going to turn out.
Where are you running? Where can people vote?
I'm running in 42nd District, which is Springfield, Lorton, Mount Vernon. We literally go from West Springfield High School down to Lorton, head out toward the Potomac, and go all the way out to the shore, Mason Neck, Westgate. So it's a large geographic area.
So folks, if you need a reason to vote tomorrow, he's standing right here.
Thank you. And
vote for
the one shout out I'd like to give is we've worked very closely with some students from Falls Church High School who have made a lot of phone calls for us, and South County High School. The South County High School kids not only made thousands of phone calls for us, they have knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors. They loved being involved in this campaign, and they have done a phenomenal job for us, and they deserve recognition.
Well, good luck to you tomorrow, Ed. 24 hours from now, maybe you'll be a new delegate.
I certainly expect to be.
He is.
All right, we'll take another break. When we come back, we have the sheriff candidate right here in Fairfax County. You won't want to miss that, or my special video on Mark Obenshain by humorist Will Roberts. Back after this.
Some dreams are universal. Dreams that inspire us. Multiple sclerosis is a devastating disease that changes lives forever. The National MS Society does more for people with MS than any organization in the world. But we can't do it alone. To get involved, visit us online at nationalmssociety.org or call 1-800-FIGHT-MS. This is why we're here. Because nobody dreams of having multiple sclerosis.
What's wrong with this picture? Half of young Americans can't locate economic powers like Japan and India. 20% can't even find the Pacific Ocean. Without geography, our children aren't ready for the world. Geography is everywhere. It's incredible creatures, rhythm, fashion, flavor. It's economics and politics. It's change. Understanding connections between people and places is critical in the 21st century. That's why we created mywonderfulworld.org. Go there now for your free parent and teacher action kits and give our kids the power of global knowledge. Because kids who understand our world today can succeed in tomorrow.
Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton. I'm the host of Inside Scoop Virginia. And with me tonight is Mark Levine, who is the host of Inside Scoop. And Mark typically does national and international and amazing kinds of things, so you have to make sure you always tune in for him as well. And then with me, and he has been here the entire show, is Cesar Del Aguila, who is the chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. And we have switched off of our delegates and now have Stacy Kincaid with us. And Stacy is the Democratic candidate for Fairfax County and Fairfax City and the town of Vienna and the town of Herndon. We always forget that, and some people will say, oh, it's Fairfax County. It's not. It's much broader than that. She is the Democratic candidate, and I can't say that enough. And Cesar, I know you'll agree with me on this, because the sheriff's office is a constitutional officer in Virginia. And so when people go to vote tomorrow, they will see 4 people listed under sheriff. There's only one woman, Stacey Ann Kincaid, our Democratic candidate, and then there are 3 guys. But they won't say Democrat or Republican or Independent. And so when you go in, you have to know Stacey's the Democrat, and we have on our sample ballots, it's indicated there. On Stacey's signs, it's indicated there, because people just don't know, and they get in and they want to support Democrats. They realize how important this is, and then they hit something that doesn't have an identification on it. So anyway, welcome back, Stacey. Right after you won the caucus, you won the ran against the interim sheriff, as people will remember, and you won your caucus 600 and some odd votes to 350 or something. We had you on back then. You hadn't been out doing much campaigning in the general population, but you've been doing it a lot lately. So how has this been? You're not running screaming from the room, I take it?
No, not at all. I first want to thank Mark and you as well, Bettina, for having me on the show. This has been a journey. It has been an experience that people ask me often, well, what do you expect? What did you expect? And I got to tell you, this has been something that I really haven't really thought about in the beginning, but it's certainly been amazing. I've met so many people all throughout Fairfax County, and it's truly been an experience.
Well, was there anything, you did a lot of like League of Women voter forums. How was that? Because they did those, and Cesar, I don't know if they had this in prior years, but they had one of those. Yeah, they had them in every single magisterial district. There were like 9 of these things. And that, I just, and I went to them and they were like, you had very different people.
What are some of the questions that people asked that you felt were important to answer there?
One of the most important things were, what does the sheriff do? A lot of people in Fairfax County, they know that there's a police department. Some of them know that there's a sheriff's office.
What do you do, Stacey? Or what would you do?
Thank you for asking, Mark. In Fairfax County, the sheriff's office is responsible for managing the adult detention center, providing security for our courthouse, and serving civil law process. So those 3 core functions are unique to Fairfax County because we have a police department. We also do a lot of things externally and work a lot with our community very collaboratively in terms of many different things. From our Project Lifesaver program, which tracks those children that have that are autistic, to the adults that have Alzheimer's and dementia, as well as we work with children that reside in homeless shelters, and we do a lot of great things. So I think that the most important thing was to let folks know what our agency does.
And yours it's the biggest agency. How big, you've got sworn deputies and then civilians, so how big is this department we're talking about?
We have approximately 612 staff members, and we have over 300 volunteers that help supplement our staff.
Okay, and then how many inmates? What size are we talking about here?
Our average daily population runs about 1,200. And sometimes, of course, the colder it gets, unfortunately, the population tends to go up, especially with those folks that are homeless.
Well, I heard something early on about homeless people living in the lobby of the jail?
That was correct. We had homeless folks living in the lobby of our adult detention center, and that was, once they get out and they don't have a place to go, or they just, for whatever, if they have a mental health issue, they just go where they are going to be warm and they're going to be safe, and whatever belongings they have are going to be, protected.
Well, how do you find when you go around the county, because the mental health thing that you just mentioned, people seem to ask about that a lot. How does that work? Because there's There's a perception that somehow these people are getting into the jail and they're just sort of warehoused, I think was the phrase somebody used one time. We're a big warehouse for mental health people, mentally ill people. What can people expect? They just show up, you lock them up. Do you do anything with them?
Unfortunately, the jail has become the default in terms of health care for the mentally, those folks that are mentally ill. And it's almost a double-edged sword because they come in and while they're locked up, we have the Community Services Board, which is comprised of psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers who work in conjunction with our medical staff as well as our deputy sheriffs and civilian staff, and are able to provide treatment in some type of, safe environment out of the elements. However, that's not a place for individuals that have mental health issues. So this is an opportunity for us to work collaboratively, not only with our Community Services Board, but also with groups throughout Fairfax County, and also with their families, and establish some type of post-release program where they're able to be tracked and they're able to get there's more resources available to them once they get out.
Well, that's a huge issue because people always look at the folks who are involved in the mass shootings and keep talking about that they're mentally ill people, sure, and that we need to do something about that. Now, as a sheriff, you don't make laws. We just had the delegates in here. Whatever the laws are is what you have to deal with, right? You don't get involved with making laws.
The sheriff is a constitutional officer. We enforce the laws. We don't make the laws. Absolutely correct.
Okay. So in terms of what you do at the jail, and in terms of things like, because I've heard you talk about your views on things like background checks, and including trying to figure out ways that mental illness could sort of be tagged in there. You got that right? That you're in favor of those things?
Absolutely, I'm in favor of expanded background checks. There certainly is a breakdown in terms of the communication and how we're able to identify individuals that do have mental health issues and prevent them from, I'm assuming it's in terms of this background check, and prevent them from, getting access and obtaining weapons.
Okay. And how have you found this running countywide? I mean, I've seen you've got a lot of delegates. Do you work with these other people who are running countywide, or are you just out there on your own because you're the only one? I mean, the statewide are obviously running countywide, but they're not. What kind of coordination is being done?
Well, the coordinated campaign has certainly come out and been very, very supportive, and certainly the party, FCDC, has been amazing. My union brothers and sisters, because I am a union member, I have received also lots of support from our Fairfax Deputy Sheriff's Coalition, SEIU 512, the firefighters, as well as so many other volunteers and families within Fairfax County. So we've all worked together, which has been such a great thing. And most people, again, not knowing what the sheriff's office does, this has been an opportunity to get that message out and let folks know. But I have established some great working relationships with those folks that are running, for the House of Delegates, and also with our top 3 on the ticket.
And we really appreciate your coming here and sharing your time with us. But before you go, I want you to see there's a video put out by the humorist Will Roberts about the Attorney General candidate Mark Obenshain. If we could go ahead and play that, I want to show them what it has to do with his proposal to require women who had miscarriages to report them to the police. Can we play the clip?
Well, we're going to try it.
Here it is.
Oh, good.
The other day I'm on Google, right? The Google. And I decided I'm going to search up the Obamacare website, Affordable Care Act. Oh, by the way, side note, Mr. President, I'm totally behind you. I know you're going to figure this out. Anyway, I'm typing with my 2 fingers, and I slip up with one of them, and I accidentally type in the name Obenshain. Obenshain. Ah, I remember him. He's the Virginian politician that's going after the Attorney General's job, opposite of Mark Herring. Same first name, totally different person. Anyway, so he's also the politician that told women in his state that they would need to report their miscarriages. And if they didn't, well, it would be a criminal offense. Trusting. I just have one thing to say. Mr. Obenshain, I would hope that women in your area, the voters, have a short-term memory.
Did I say that? No, that wasn't me.
See, Mr. Obenshain, here's a little bit of advice. Just with my wife, I can tell you that she remembers things from 4 years ago, conversations we've had. She also usually remembers where my keys are that I don't know where I put them. And she also will most likely give me my lunch and send me off to work to make sure I get there on time. Oh, and give me directions in case I get lost.
I don't have a clue where I'm at.
So I can tell you, sir, good luck on that short-term memory. Because there's one thing I can tell you that women don't like. It's to be told what to do, especially with their bodies.
If we tell women what to do with their bodies, doesn't that make us pimps?
Report their miscarriages. A little personal. Let's stick to reporting our taxes. You know, let the government get in our pockets, but not get in our you know. Oh, in regards to the Obamacare website, Mr. President, I have a suggestion for you too. I suggest that you maybe take that website and change it just a little bit. Yeah, call it the Affordable Care Act. Yeah, see, because if it's not going to work, then it might as well provide us with a little bit of humor instead of what it's providing us with now, a little bit of sadness. I'm Will Roberts, and this is your Weekly Telegram.
I just thought that was an interesting take on really the three top candidates. I don't think there's a greater anti-woman group ever to run in Virginia than Cuccinelli, Jackson, or this guy Obenshain. And I would hope that for women and men everywhere who care about women, that we vote for Terry McAuliffe and Mark Herring and for Ralph Northam.
Well, and I do want to say, because you're talking about the women, that Stacey Kincaid is the first woman to run for sheriff. And when she wins tomorrow, she will be the first woman in 271 years in Fairfax County.
Wow.
Ever.
Good luck to you. Good luck to you as well tomorrow in getting people out to vote. Folks, the polls are open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. You have no excuse not to vote. The precinct is near your home. If you have to work that day, they'll let you off to vote. Do not forget to vote. 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. tomorrow. Your future's at stake. Just got to get out and vote. Thank you, Bettina, of course. Sherman, thank you, Cesar.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Stacey. Good luck to you tomorrow. And we'll be back next week for another edition of The Inside Scoop.